Hello and welcome to the British Dapper, and today we're talking about 10 essential items for autumn and winter. So this video is looking at the end of autumn leading into winter. That period where it's starting to get really cold, fresh, quite damp in some cases. We're looking at a temperate climate, and I'm going to break down the 10 items into two different distinct levels, which is first of all the more formal look and a more casual look. So for each category, each 10 item, we will define it in a casual and a formal setting. So let's dive right in. And this is talking about winter shirts. So when we talk about shirts, generally dress shirts tend to be poplin and very similar materials. And if you're talking about cotton or polyester, but they're quite thin shirts. But you can get something a little bit more substantial that will add a level of protection because of their thickness. So for example, it's not uncommon to see a twill being used in the shirt, or even a herringbone pattern, and that makes a formal shirt more winterized, if you like. So for example here, you might not be able to pick it up, but this is a lot thicker material than your typical lighter shirt, for example poplin or something along those lines, or a very fine cotton. This is a little bit more substantial, almost a linen material, the thickness of it, and it's ideal for the winter months because it gives you that little bit more protection than a normal dress shirt, and it still has that formal look. And it tends to be more of a matte finish than a shiny surface, so it's quite good for contrasting with a suit and a tie, for example. So something else we can consider is a flannel shirt, which is a cotton shirt made of flannel. Tends to be checked in most cases, but for a casual setting, and maybe in this situation where you might want something a little bit more warmer, this gives you that level of protection that you wouldn't normally get in the summer months from a short-sleeved shirt or even from a dress shirt. And they come in a variety of styles and cuts and finishes. And this is for the bottom half of your body, and we're talking about winter trousers. So besides the casual look where we could look for corduroy trousers, we could look for moleskin trousers. They're ideal for the winter months. They give you a more rustic, more winterized feel, and when you wear those sort of things in the winter months, you feel more cozy wearing them. But also in the more formal setting, then maybe we're talking about a worsted pair of trousers or a flannel based pair of trousers. So for example here we have some flannel trousers, and you can see they are a lot thicker than normal dress trousers, and they do give you that little bit more warmth when wearing them in the winter months. Something else to consider is number 3 on my list. Now we're going to be talking about ties. Now I think people will say, a tie in winter? You know, what's so special about that? Well, I'm going to suggest to you, if you've ever had to wear a tie in the summer months when you didn't really want to, you'll know that by simply putting on that tie, you increase the temperature. You increase your warmth, body warmth, significantly actually. So by wearing a tie in the first place, you increase the body warmth. And secondly, The other thing is that you can wear a wool tie, which is a bit thicker and more robust than a silk tie, and it gives you a different sort of look. So for example, in a formal setting you could wear something like this, and you can see whilst the colour is typical, the pattern has got herringbone pattern, and it actually gives it a bit of texture, and it's very thick and robust. And this is 100% wool, and so you don't just have to have a pattern tie, you can have a relatively plain tie as well, made out of wool. And they are very, very nice ties to wear. They knot well, they hold a good knot, and they keep you warm as well. Another type of tie, if you're going for a more semi-casual, more informal look, then we're talking about maybe something along the lines of these. So these are clan ties, and they're made of 100% wool. They're a little bit thinner than the ones I've just shown you. These are more akin to flannel sort of wool mix. They're a little bit thinner, but they do add a pop of colour, and they come in a range of colours. And so when it comes to clan ties, for example, Scottish tartan, then there's no restriction on the clan tie as such, the clan tartan. It's open to just about anybody, unless it's a private tartan, unless it's assigned to a group or a club or a specific organisation where they've had their own clan or their own tartan created. For example, the Balmoral tartan is specific for people that either work at Balmoral or the royal family. No one else is expected to wear the Balmoral tartan. So moving on the list down to the next one, which is number 4. And what we're talking about here is footwear. When the winter months start getting in, we're going to get wetter and colder conditions. Now, I would always suggest that you move from a leather-soled shoe to a more rubber-soled shoe. And the reason why I suggest this is for 2 reasons. So the first would be for your own personal safety. Leather shoes do not go well with slippery surfaces, particularly in snow conditions. So therefore I would suggest, if you're going to wear a formal shoe and you're in a situation in an urban environment, then maybe consider something with a rubber sole. This could be a leather-soled shoe that has an additional rubber sole applied to it, or it could be, for example, a welted shoe that has got, for example, a day-night or a Vibram sole added to it. And it gives you that, whilst it gives you that leather shoed look and feel, it also gives you that much more level of safety with the footwear and durability in the winter months, because obviously water and snow and prolonged wear in those environments damages the leather soles. And whilst I know you can treat the leather soles with waterproof coating, I can assure you after a short amount of time in a consistent wet environment that will wear off, and the shoes will absorb water over time and damage the leather potentially. So something to consider there about that rubber soled shoe. I personally, in the winter months, I'll buy a pair of shoes or a pair of boots that I feel would be able to accommodate that formal, informal look. So just about every year I'll buy a rubber soled pair of Chelsea boots or something like that for a more formal setting, and a pair of brown boots for more casual environments and settings. And at the end of the year, I'll either put them in a charity shop for somebody else to use because they won't have had too much wear. But if they get damaged or affected by the cold weather, then fine, I'm wasting a matter of £40 instead of £200 on a pair of shoes. So it's a reasonable adjustment to make. You can always wear that to a venue and then get changed into decent shoes once you're in the office, or if you're in the venue where you will be meeting people, for example. Now, number 5 on the list is the jumper. I like my roll neck jumpers in the winter months, and also something a little bit more with a bit more substance. So in a formal setting it's very difficult, but you can wear a very thin cardigan underneath a suit. It gives you that extra layer of warmth and not necessarily affect the look of the overall suit when it's done up. You can also wear, for example, a sleeveless jumper. That gives you a little bit like a waistcoat look, and if you pick the colour cleverly, it will add to the ensemble rather than detract from it. So, for example, I would always suggest don't try and match the colour with your suit. It's never going to work, and it's a different texture and look. So maybe go the other way and do something where it complements the suit rather than try to match it, and you'll get a much better aesthetic. And when it comes to the casual look, those chunky Aran jumpers, they're great in the winter months for adding a layer of warmth, but also giving you that country rural vibe as well. So that brings us on to number 6 on the list, and this is quite simply, off the top of my head, hats. So in the winter months, whilst you might be able to wear a trilby, you might be able to wear a fedora, the wind picks up and maybe that's not the best choice of hat. So from a formal point of view, you're limited to what you can wear. When it comes to the more casual look, then we are talking about maybe wearing those newsboy hats, a typical flat cap. But I want to introduce you to something else that maybe you haven't considered, and that's the Bretton cap. And it's a little bit like this. So it's almost it's a nautical vibe, but you may remember seeing this around in the 60s. A lot of people wore them, so late 60s, early 70s. It's quite common to see that hat. And it's a little bit different to that of a flat cap or, for example, a newsboy hat. So just to liven it up and change it around a little bit. So number 7 on the list is protecting those hands, and that is gloves. Now gloves, yes, you can come into the more formal look where you're wearing very thin gloves, normally leather. Tend to get your gloves to match your shoes as an example. They are lovely to keep your hands warm, but depending on the weather depends how effective they are. So if they're only leather and they're not lined, they're fine for very mild conditions. Once you start getting some cold and they start getting wet or damp, then they are going to be very uncomfortable to wear. So it might be a case of going for something that's insulated more. Tend to go for wool materials being used for the insulation, but in this day and age, if you can afford it, that is, I would go for Dent gloves. Dent make lovely gloves. I have in the past used them. They're reasonably priced, to be fair. If you shop around, you can get them for about £45, £50, £60 a pair. But they'll last for years and years. They really are very durable gloves. Of course, you can spend more or less than that, and it's just my recommendation, having used them before myself. So Now, at the moment I'm going through other gloves that I've got from Marks and Spencer's and a couple of other suppliers as well. And to be fair, they're really good gloves. Middle of the range, nothing special, but they keep your hands warm. They're relatively well insulated to keep you warm. But if you really want to go for something with a much more higher level of warmth and performance, then maybe you're looking at lambskin leather and also or suede leather, and then with that much more thicker insulation being used. But they are obviously more expensive. But don't forget, protect those hands. Without them you can't undo your buttons on your coat or put your brolly up or open your briefcase up if your hands are all numb. So number 8 on the list is a scarf. Now you can look like one of the old Doctor Who people with a very long scarf wrapped around your neck about 5 or 6 times. I think that's maybe a little bit too much, but if you're going to wear a scarf, I would always advise going for something that is of a natural fibre. Wool, alpaca, cashmere, they are lovely materials to use. They keep you warm, and even when they get damp, they still have that ability to keep you warm. They still generate warmth. Polyester and other man-made fibres, whilst they are warm, once they get wet they lose that ability to generate heat or keep heat, and you can actually find yourself being quite cold, and they end up being waterlogged and obviously not so comfortable to wear. But it's all about budget. I would always suggest try and go for 100% wool if you can. Number 9 on the list is along the lines of, from a more formal point of view, I would suggest we're looking at a winter suit. Something that's much more thicker than your standard suit. We're looking at a 4-season suit, 3 or 4 season suit. So it's a lot thicker, normally wool based, maybe a tweed suit. Or a very heavy worsted material. Now that is great for giving you that level of warmth and protection. In a more casual setting, maybe then you're looking at more of a tweed based material. So if we're looking at a tweed jacket, then they're ideal for the autumn winter months. And obviously over the top of a jumper or as we said, the shirt and a jumper, wearing a wool tie, you're increasing those layers and the warmth factor as well. A wool coat over the top of that would finish it off. So number 10, here we're looking at coats for the winter months. So for a formal setting, I'm going to suggest 2. One is a full-length wool coat. I'd recommend something along the lines of the military style, which means that it's double-breasted, has epaulets, quite a tapered look, very much in vogue at the moment, and it does look really good for that formal environment. The alternative to that, when it comes to keeping dry, is some form of raincoat. Now, many years ago I had a Burberry raincoat. It was double-breasted, it was a trench coat, lovely material, and it really was effective in those winter months. It is waterproof to a point, but obviously for any duration in that sort of environment, eventually it will give way and water will eventually intrude the jacket or the coat, and it tends to go more because it's getting into the seamed areas and also in the neck area of the jacket or coat, and that's how it ends up getting wet on the inside. So it's something to consider. The wool coat's great for the insulation, for the cold, but when it comes to more rainy conditions, then maybe that Burberry raincoat, trench coat, aquascutum, there's a number of them out there, and I'm sure it comes down to budget at the end of the day, whether you can spend £1,000 or £100, depends on what you want to get. But something else to consider in the casual setting, whilst that wool coat we were talking about earlier on is great in the urban and more, shall we say, formal setting, it does cross over into the more informal setting. So maybe with a pair of jeans or those corduroy trousers or moleskin trousers, a pair of shoes, and for example a roll neck jumper, you can still wear that and get away with it. It's still a good fashionable look for that more casual setting. But when it comes to waterproof situations, when it comes to a coat, I would suggest maybe going more towards the Barber jacket, 3/4 length maybe. You can get much longer ones as well, but I would say stick to something that is more traditional wax jacket. Comes to mid-thigh area, great for keeping you dry in the rain and the wet conditions, but it doesn't really cross over into the urban environment, and certainly not in the formal looking areas that we would normally wear a suit, but down to personal choice. So those are my 10 items that I would wear in the late autumn, winter months. Let me know what you think, what you might wear. Have I missed something off the list? Bearing in mind I've only got 10 items to use, but if you've got something better that you want to put on that list, then jot it down below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you'd like to subscribe, then please feel free to do so. We have a Buy Me a Coffee page, and I'll put the link down below so you can make a contribution to the channel if you wish to do so. So until next time, take care.